Mr. Sandeep Khanna, Director Information Security and CISO of UIDAI, the Aadhaar Implementation Agency. Can we have Mr. Sandeep Khanna? If you can please join us on stage. May I request Mr. B. Paparaju, Executive Director, CISO of ONGC. Sir, please join us on stage. Mr. Sushil Kumar, Chief General Manager, BIS and CISO of Gas Authority of India, GAIL. Sir, can we have you on stage? Mr. Shalin Khetarpal, Assistant Vice President and CISO of BSES Rajdhani Power. Can we have sir on stage? And Mr. Somnath Kundu, DGM and alternate CISO of NTPC. Can we have you on stage, please? Okay, so since this is this session has a separate challenge. It's immediately the first session post-lunch, and there is always a little bit inertia within the audience during that time. So let's have, and also there is paucity of time. So let's do it in a rapid-fire format. And as you all are cybersecurity leaders, and especially handling some of the largest enterprises in the country, Navratnas, Mini Ratnas, and all. So, primarily, we wanted to touch upon aspects like blockchain, then the access identity management, privileged access. But I would perhaps then start, maybe go to each panelist and ask each of you in a couple of minutes to just highlight the biggest cybersecurity challenge your current organization is facing at the moment. You can outline just the challenge now. We will look at the prescription in a subsequent round. So I'll start with you, Mr. Sandeep Khanna. From an Aadhaar perspective, I know huge amount of data and information, and there are privacy concerns. So what is the biggest security challenge you are facing currently?
So, good afternoon, everybody. When I talk of security challenges, let me talk about we all are aware that today's cyber is a threat. It is an imminent threat which is due to which we are all sitting here to discuss this issue. When I talk of the challenges within an organization is in terms of a security culture that has to be built. Per se, what happens is that the understanding or the comprehension of security threats, per se, within an organization externally, is not very much. To build that culture, especially in an enterprise grade, is a very important facet. And it takes some time because there is a lot of inertia, because we have a mix. When we talk of a PSU or talk of a government organization, there is a mixed component of having MSPs, having government officials. So that inertia has to be taken care of. One has to make the environment understand what exactly is security threats, what are the imminent, and how do you want to overcome them. What is the essential needs of having people, process, and technology in place? Why does it matter? Why should we ensure that these are in place? And it's not only for, now I'll go a little beyond in terms of saying only not me, say our organization. It's for in general that this is a very essential component that we take security seriously. And why so? Because today, when you talk of adversaries, this is one domain which they have actually tried to leverage. Nobody wants to go into for full-fledged conflicts. It is only looking at hitting your crown jewels by a cyber attack is something which any country or any adversary would look at.
Okay, thank you. So primarily you are identifying the need for awareness culture within the organization. Yes, obviously a big concern. I'll next come to Mr. B. Paparaju. Again, the same question from an ONGC perspective, one of the largest oil and gas companies in the country. What is the biggest cybersecurity challenge you are facing today?
The biggest challenge is none of the software is perfect. So every software vendor, name it, they have patches being released. So everyone has the certification for the testing and all, but still a lot of weaknesses come in. That's the what gives us sleepless nights for any CISO, I think. So the life is of patching. So when we patch, the problems will come with patching. So do you patch with N? Do you patch with N-1, N-2? How do you check the system stability when we patch? That becomes a big challenge. Because nowadays when we are going digital, we are becoming very application dependent intensively. So a small change in the application performance causes a lot of disruption in the business. So how do you ensure that the patching does happen without disruption? That's one thing. Another is the skilling. Because PSUs recruit basically on the broad engineering qualification. None of the recruits an ethical cybersecurity hacker. So if I don't have the knowledge of hacking, I can't be a good defender. That is the business perspective. And even if I outsource the skills, the L1 vendor doesn't procure the resource, doesn't have the resource. Because the attrition level in cybersecurity is so high right now, very difficult to meet the requirements. And just because somebody has a CISO certification also doesn't ensure a good talent pool coming and working in it. So this is a major challenge.
Okay, thanks. So you have touched upon the main relevance of this challenge you mentioned, obviously lack of skilled manpower with relevant skills, and that definitely internally and even the third-party solution providers may not have the requisite relevant skill power. And you touched upon the nitty-gritty of obviously that that's for there are a lot of third-party solution providers or vendors here. The issue of patch management. So will that remain only marketing action that there are so many patch management requirements, and that doing so much patching itself can often be a challenge for manpower who are not adequately trained in these organizations. So a lot of food for thought there. I'll come next to Mr. Sushil Kumar from GAIL, again from the gas industry, one of the largest PSUs in the country. The biggest challenge that you would like to highlight in this forum?
In my opinion, in our organization, biggest challenge what we are facing is the integration of OT with IT. Because our plant is 35 years old, at that point in time, certain equipments and other things were there which were not having those facility, and nowadays the OT team want that their devices should be supported by the respective OEM remotely from their out of India or from outside of the plant. So this is connecting OT systems to IT. This is one of the biggest challenge what we are facing. So we are, for this we are giving awareness to the OT team. OT training we are also conducting, and we are start working on that.
Okay, thank you. Yes, from a manufacturing and infrastructure organization set up, the core sector, if I may say, the IT-OT marriage, that's the biggest challenge that increasingly I'm sure the CIOs and the CISOs are facing. While IT security, we have fairly evolved, but on the OT security part, and there are a lot of issues. The production environment, obviously the people are not so much IT savvy. Then there are a lot of equipments also which might be still legacy kind of equipments, and which require that technical migration, which has not happened to that extent which is desirable. And when we are increasingly sensors are being deployed across organization, and we talk about industrial IoT and stuff, the IT-OT marriage, if I may say, needs to happen more successfully, if I may say. Next, I'll come to Mr. Shalin Khetrapal He's from BACS Rajdhani Power, one of the largest power utility companies in the country. And my question again is the same. For you, the biggest security challenge at the moment?
Thank you very much. The biggest challenge, or like I would say, the most common challenge in a power distribution company is with the OT devices. Number one, there is no standardization. There is no standardization to phase out the legacy. There is no benchmarking or baselining. Number two, availability of skill. So we need more manpower, more skilled resources to handle the security of the OT devices. Number three is tools. There's a large dependency, huge dependency on the OEM, and there is a scarcity of the tools in the market who can actually handle the OT security. So these are the three important things: skill, tools, and awareness.
Excellent. So the skill part we have already talked, but you have touched upon the important part that there is a lack of standardization and benchmarking measures. Basically, especially as far as OT is concerned, lot of legacy devices. And another important thing you talked about is capacity building, the scaling up. That is also obviously another challenge. So for this round, my last speaker is Mr. Somnath Kundu from NTPC. So this is from the power generation. We have heard from the power distribution side. Now from the power generation side, as a cybersecurity leader, your biggest security challenge currently at the moment?
So first of all, thank you APAC News Network team for inviting me to this program. Now the challenges, as far as what I think in this field is a correct estimation, accurate estimation of my asset inventory, followed by a good risk assessment. Because risk assessments, if I don't assess the business process criticality correctly, the risk assessment fails. And the other challenge obviously is the people part. As Shalin sir was also telling, and all our esteemed speakers was also telling, since in the OT environment particularly, lot of expertise are required to master a certain kind of an OT environment. And in this era of stringent manpower and all manpowers being on ever transferable positions, so somebody becoming expertise on a certain kind of an OT environment, getting into the security depths of that OT, suddenly placed into a altogether new kind of an OT. So the people awareness, the people training, upskilling, all these things goes into vain. So I think that's another big challenge where the people upskilling is really a point of concern. So for me, I think these two are the basic concern. And the other point is, obviously one challenge is which solution to take, which solution not to take to get a correct security posture.
Okay, thanks. So again, you touched upon the requisite skill, especially as far as OT is concerned, required. And you talked also about the risk assessment part. Yes, very proper assessment can always be, we need not always be reactive. We heard in the morning also, there is need to do some sort of predictive kind of analysis also. We always know prevention is better than cure. So that is also an important aspect. So we have heard from each panelist about their biggest challenge. Now, again, coming back in that sequence to each panelist, my recommendation is, my question is, what would your recommendation be as far as the best practice in cybersecurity that can be consequence of the challenge that you mentioned, or it might be something else, but what would you highlight as a best practice that either you are already observing in your organization or you intend to do so, but one best practice. So I'll start again with Mr. Sandeep Khanna.
Okay, there are plethora of things you can talk of, best practices, when the list is long. But if I talk of basic, see, the aim, our approach, when you say, should be proactive vis-a-vis being reactive. So when I look at my ecosystem, I would look at more of a preventive control vis-a-vis or detection in a this.
Okay.
That is what. So we need to structure when you do a risk assessment of our business processes. We need to ensure that our prevention strategy is at the forefront vis-a-vis our detection strategy. We don't have to look at. We do not have to look at that. Okay, that I don't have that my preventive control is not in place, and I'm looking at detection best. But when I come to now talking of best practices, I would say that it would be more that now the defense and defense strategy, which is already in place, seems to have now withered away because of the kind of the offensive nature of the attacker is. We have to now look at from a zero trust architecture. When I say zero trust, it's that assuming breach. So when I say assume breach, I assume that he's already there in the system, and how will he go lateral? So we have to build our own ecosystem in a manner that our crown jewels are safe, and that's what. So it should be a mixed strategy of having a defense in depth also,
Here-
and also having a zero trust concept.
If I may interrupt here, we obviously keep on hearing from cybersecurity leaders as well as from the solution providers on zero trust. Now, my question is fundamental understanding. What do you think? Zero trust, is it a concept or is it an architecture?
Okay.
How would you?
So it's not a solution. So when I say that, if you say no offense meant to the vendors here who are supporting this whole thing, it's not. It's a concept. When I talk of zero trust, it would in terms of its identity. So is for me to have that identity in place. When I say that, as I said, since I'm a army background folk, I would say that identity becomes a very important entity for me to say that whenever I'm within a system, whether it is a user, whether it is a service account, it should be like at every stage that that you are challenged, there is an authentication mechanism, there is an authorization, all is set in place. So first part when you say of is in terms of the identity part. When you talk of its posture check, when so-called was the concept of talking of posture check is in terms of identifying the who the resource is, what is it. Subsequent is in terms of making sure that where does this particular, what access do I have? When I talk after the identity part, I'm talking the access management. So what am I entitled, where can I actually, what accesses I have, that is very essential. Because I may have come into the system, there onwards, if I have a free run, if I can actually from say an endpoint, I can reach to my production systems, that's what as an attacker, that my achievement is. Also when I talk of zero trust, I would say that I would like to have encryption by default. At the transport layer, fine, but even at rest, that is very important. That's what I would say in brief what zero trust would be.
Okay, thanks. So you touched upon the zero trust and the identity as your prescription, identity authorization, first authentication, authorization, and then on the zero trust as a concept. Mr. Paparaju, your one prescription of a security best practice you would like to follow?
Well, first of all, I think there is no one single prescription which meets all the diseases. And we normally write that in our approval files. There is no one solution which meets all the problems. So that's why we have any organization you go, just for cyber security, we have n number of solutions in different perspectives. Fundamentally, I would look into 3 or 4 major aspects. The first thing is we all have an information security management system. We comply to some standard. Every organization does it. Only thing is, are we following it perfectly? We have it on paper or do we have it in practice? That is the fundamental best practice. If you practice what we preach, that is fundamentally solves 90% of the issues. Because ultimately, when I say, what is the problem we have? How can you control the uncontrollables? That's the question. One cannot control the uncontrollables, or how a hacker behaves is not in your domain. You cannot control it. The only thing we can control is, are we staying within our rules? Are we staying protecting? Because when a policy is made, it takes a 360-degree approach. So it is not only the cyber security, it's also physical access control security. The not just the application access, who wants to access, the zero trust, like need to know basis, need to work basis. So we all integrate with the Active Directory service mostly to maintain the single sign-on and the, because that's where the employee database gets regularly updated. But in most of the cyber acts which have recently happened, the first thing which was compromised is the Active Directory service. Because once you get a admin login, then one cannot remove a hacker from a system. So how does a hacker think? He will try to get his best, do his best to get an admin login. So that's where the problem comes up. Once an admin login is there, you cannot remove from the system. And the one of two other best practices, having regular drills for the application, because if an eventuality happens, how fast you respond to, how fast, like in a boxing ring, if you are hit by a punch or something, how fast you can get back on your knees. That's the only thing matters. Can you get back or not?
Okay.
So if you get back, what is the time?
So,
Another is, the important thing is, just one last one. Table talk exercises are very important, because normally in a crisis we have teams, but who does what? In any plant, most of us are all engineers who come with industrial backgrounds. We have seen drills are very important, and even in the cyber security, drill is very important with a tabletop exercise. Like a tabletop exercise gives a scenario. So in the scenario, who does what? Who does respond? What are the options? So it is better to prepare rather than act at later date.
okay, so the drills are very important thing you mentioned. I wanted to ask you one more thing. You initially talked about the compliances with a lot of these regulations. So my question is, you need to obviously have your organization secure. You have to follow the stringent regulatory guidelines also. And at the same time, you have to optimize productivity for the organization. How do you balance all the three?
No organization will say produce with unsafe practice. So when we say we are trying to shortcut or put a, what we call Indian parlance, a jugaad in place. So that will obviously have a risk. When you say risk, so my simple thing is not even that, practice what you preach. You say you make an official policy, jugaad is okay, then that's fine. So you know the risk. You don't trust even your system then. Zero trust, extend the zero trust to somebody else.
Great.
So simple thing is one should practice what the documents say.
So very important. Strictly following the practice, what you preach might take care of a lot of the challenges in this scenario. Mr. Sushil Kumar, next, your one best practice in cybersecurity that you should follow.
In my opinion, to protect from the ransomware, normally that the attacker first of and the foremost attack the tape library disk area where the backups are stored. So we should have backup in a detachable media, so that in the worst case scenario, even in case the organization is having the ransomware attack, at least we are not at zero stage. We are having, say, we are having 5 days old data or something. So some practice we want to follow, that at least at some frequency we are having the offsite backup. One is this. Second, we want that the laptops and the mobiles of the vendors, third-party persons, OEMs, which are to be connected to the corporate network, it should be thoroughly sanitized, or some specified rule is there that those laptops and all those things, they are having some specified patch level and this antivirus solution and all those things.
Okay, thanks. So if I may sum up, the two important things that you talked about, one was the device management of the entire ecosystem, and the other thing that you talked about was basically what I may say, the device management.
Device management, like the vendors, like some vendor comes to the organization that I have to give presentation. It should not be that. It should not be that we should immediately connect his laptop to the this thing. That
Exactly.
laptop, which will of the vendor OEM or this, that should satisfy the basic some prerequisite of the organization, and
Okay.
it should be network access and all those things. So only then we will provide the network access of the laptop to be connected to that.
Okay. So I'll put up one question to you on this, very briefly answering. What we had seen, especially after the COVID pandemic, I know you are all from large manufacturing organization and pure work from home was not viable here. But still, we had seen a lot of these employees moving to a work from anywhere kind of environment and connecting from any device, any sort of devices. So this this sort of hybrid model is likely to be there in the future. So how is the challenge, this device management thing you are talking about?
That is separate thing. Those devices, they are connected to the VDI, virtual desktop interface. Though they are not connecting directly to the server. So
Okay.
I am talking about, say, if a vendor or OEM has come and he directly connecting his laptop to the LAN of our network.
Partner ecosystem, their devices you are talking about. Okay. Another very critical thing we heard. Shalin, I'll come to you next. Your biggest, main best practice, what you would prescribe?
In my opinion, if one has to evaluate the assets of his organization, what kind of assets you have, what are the weaknesses, what are the vulnerabilities in the asset, what are the legacies, where we need to do a patch, where we need to do an upgrade, and there should be constant testing of these assets. Security testing of the assets is very important. This should be done at a periodic level, and there should be a plan to upgrade those assets and phase out the assets.
So this technology audit from a PSU perspective, we know PSUs have to follow a lot of government policies and which always are not very up to date with the, so these sort of periodicity of these technology kind of audits, how frequent they are and how successfully they are devised. I'll come to you.
So we are doing a quarterly security audits, both functional as well as the device security.
Okay, quarterly. Okay, that's a good recommendation. Mr. Shomnath Kundu, now your best practice recommendation.
So, for me, the best practice, again, in a general term, layman's language, it's just like a doctor prescribing broad spectrum antibiotic. So, it's just like, I would make an interesting point over here is that generally we do this remediation part once we are talking about incident and its response. But I think if we dig deep and have a good practice of remediating any kind of loopholes we are aware of, be it in the architecture, be it technical, or be it a policy-oriented one, it should be immediately remediated because that is one weak link in the entire chain which is killing that chain. The other part, the other best practice which I would like to put through is, I think again I will like to take upon from Paparaju sir, what he was telling is that whatever you have designed, whatever was initially implemented, should continue irrespective of the requirement of ease of the end customer within your organization. The end customer's ease should not be a priority. The design should continue even in a phase of 10 to 12 years. That design should still stick on. And the third factor, which I very bluntly try to put upon, is that, as was already discussed earlier, that being in a generation company at least, the only task, or be it for any other organization, whatever be the outcome, whatever be the economics, whatever be the commercials, go for upgradation of legacy system. Gone are days when we still think of working with legacy system, putting countermeasures on them and protecting them. In this era of very, very sophisticated hacking environment and the hackers will always be ahead of us, how much we try. If we are not upgrading our system to the latest one and still trying to continue with the legacy one, then we are sitting duck.
Okay, so if I may briefly ask you here, again, sticking to a PSU environment, how practical or viably this legacy upgradation is being done, and what is the period of technology obsolescence in a PSU kind of scenario?
So to answer the second question first, for us it is somewhere around 7 to 8 years.
Okay.
If I talk about, roughly I talk about Windows obsolescence phase and upcoming applications provenness factor. And to answer the previous part, I have a very positive thing to say. Right from the government, from the ministry to the organization management, everybody is supporting any kind of investment done for a good cyber posture, and upgradation is one of them. So we are definitely getting support from all these three pillars.
Okay, thank you. So, if I may sum up the discussion that we have had, the critical issues we had talked about were there is lack of cyber secure skilled manpower. There is a lack of culture, cybersecurity culture in the PSUs. Regular audit are required. The identity management is essential. Obviously, we heard about the remediation policies, and then the technology obsolescence that's happening. Overall, having a cyber secure fail-safe environment, device management environment with the larger ecosystem too. So these are all the critical issues that we discussed. So before I conclude, one short question. I didn't mention the OT part. All of you all mentioned the OT part. So this is an open question. Anyone can answer. Briefly, the future of OT security in terms of for Indian PSUs. Is it already mainstream, or if not, how soon do you think it will happen? Anyone? Yes, sir.
Sure. So the OT security is in progress, and I believe government is working on all the fronts, be it the end user or the vendors or the OEMs. So all like areas are being touched upon, and like I believe in next 5 years, as the span three to 5 years, we can see that a lot of change would happen in the like OT security span area.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone would like to add here? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I would not consider OT as a separate part of any of the system. It is rather, I would think as a subset of IT, because the demand of analytics is a central layer in IT, and the data is in the OT. So unless you both merge together, there is no data flow for analytics, any analytics,
Okay.
because the data is in sensors. So in the near future, there won't be any sort of a convergence. Is not a question. It's not an option. It's a business necessity.
Okay. Obviously, sir. Yes, sir. Sure.
So since there are a lot of service providers over here, so I would like to take this opportunity, calling upon the question by Rajni sir, is that I think the time has come. OT is definitely mainstream security now. There's no doubt about it. But the time has come when service providers should be more and more in integration and touch with the OEMs as well as with the asset owner to create a customized solution rather than selling a ready-made product. So rather than going into a shop, it should be more of a architecture-oriented solution based on different organizations.
Great. Anything you would like to add, Sushil or Sandeep?
In the time to come, in next 2-3 years, there will be lot of thrust in the OT environment. Like if I talk about the GALE, because our GALE is declared as the critical information infrastructure, because it is a central SCADA is declared as the critical system. So because it has been emphasized that in case there is some issue in the central SCADA, it will impact the nation. So in OT environment, criticality is not limited to a particular organization. In case there is some challenge in the OT, it affect out of the organization in the whole nation. It can affect the economy of the nation. So, in the next 3, 4, 5 years, a lot of thrust is going to come in OT.
Okay, thank you. Sandeep, you have the last word.
So when I talk of OT and when I talk of IT, I think so they are better. If they are air gapped, it's better. If you've heard the Colonial Pipeline incident, which brought almost half of US to
Exactly.
a standstill, and you want those replications to happen, please do. See, because what happens if you understand the offensive security mindset? Today, in the IT domain, we have execution environments, but in the OT, we do not have that execution environment. Now, if you try to mix these two, there's a challenge. Yes, we need to address them separately. Means you have to have, irrespective of being air gapped, you need to have security in OT. That's a very much essential thing. But to interconnect them is a big risk.
Okay, thanks. Thanks. With that, we conclude this panel discussion. May I request Shobik to come on stage and hand over a memento to all the panelists here? Following the panel discussion, we have a special address by Lay Smriti, Vice President CSC SPV on digital transformation. Mr. Shomnath Kundu. Mr. Shalin Khetrapal. Mr. Sushil Kumar. Mr. B. Paparaju. Mr. Sandeep Khanna. Now I would request all of you to join.